It was one of those quiet evenings that felt like a reward after a long week. The house was still, the kids were with their grandparents, and for once, I thought Whitney and I might have some time to ourselves. I was in the kitchen, pouring myself a whiskey, savoring the moment. As I reached for the ice, the front door creaked open. I glanced at the clock. It was late for visitors. The creak was followed by the unmistakable sound of Nathan's heavy boots clunking on the hardwood floor. I turned around to see him walking in with that cocky grin he always wore, the one that said he knew something you didn't. "Nathan," I called out, a bit surprised but pleased to see him. "What brings you here at this hour?" He didn't answer right away, just leaned against the counter with a smug expression. "Just thought I'd drop by," he said, his tone casual but with an edge I couldn't quite place. I studied him for a moment, trying to read his face. Something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. "You want a drink?" I offered, gesturing to the bottle in my hand. Nathan shook his head, waving off the offer. "Nah, I'm not here for that," he replied, his voice suddenly hardening. There was something unsettling in his eyes, a coldness I hadn't seen before. I set the bottle down, my smile fading. "What do you mean?" Nathan took a step closer, his demeanor shifting from casual to menacing in a heartbeat. His voice dropped to a low growl. "I came here for spend a wild night with your wife," he said, his words hanging in the air like a bad smell. "She promised me and said she'd satisfy me all night long." For a moment, I was too shocked to respond. My brain struggled to process what he had just said. "What the fuck are you talking about?" I finally managed, my voice rising with anger and confusion. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink. "You heard me right. She's mine tonight, and there's nothing you can do about it." Before I could respond, I heard the soft sound of footsteps on the stairs. I turned, my heart pounding in my chest. There was Whitney, coming down slowly, dressed in something that turned my blood cold. A slinky red lingerie set that I had never seen before, something completely out of character for the woman I thought I knew. Her eyes locked onto mine, but there was no warmth, no recognition, just cold, calculated malice. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, crossing her arms over her chest. "He's right, you pathetic loser," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Don't you dare interrupt us, or he'll break your jaw." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the woman I had spent 15 years of my life with, the mother of my children. "Whitney, what the hell is going on?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. She didn't answer right away, just stared at me with that same icy expression. Then she reached behind her and pulled out a manila folder, tossing it at me. It hit the floor with a dull thud, and the papers inside spilled out. "By the way," she said, her tone casual, almost as if she were discussing the weather, "I've been lying to you for years. I only stayed because of your money. And guess what? Your kids aren't even yours. They're Nathan's. You've been raising your own nephews, you fucking idiot." I stared at the papers on the floor, my vision blurring as the words on the DNA report swam before my eyes. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I couldn't move, couldn't think. This had to be some kind of sick joke, a nightmare I would wake up from any second. Nathan chuckled, clearly enjoying my reaction. "Yeah, brother, you've been living a lie. And now it's time for you to face the truth." I looked up at Whitney, hoping, praying that this was some sort of twisted prank, that she would suddenly snap out of it and tell me it wasn't true. But there was no remorse in her eyes, no guilt, just satisfaction, like she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "What's the matter? Can't handle the truth?" she taunted, stepping closer to Nathan, who wrapped an arm around her waist possessively. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, shock, anger, betrayal, but above all, an overwhelming sense of loss. Everything I thought I knew, everything I had built, was crumbling before me. "How could you do this?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "How could you both do this to me?" Whitney laughed, a harsh, cruel sound that cut through the air like a knife. "Because you're weak, simp," she spat. "You were never enough for me, for anyone. Nathan's the man you could never be. He's everything you're not, strong, decisive, a real man." Nathan smirked, leaning in to kiss her neck. "And now, We're taking everything. The house, the money, the kids. You're nothing, just a pathetic shell of a man who's been living a lie. I could feel the rage building inside me, a boiling, seething fury that threatened to consume me. But I was still frozen, paralyzed by the sheer weight of their betrayal. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but my body wouldn't obey. Whitney turned to Nathan, her hand on his chest, eyes full of disdain as she looked at me. Let's go, babe. We've wasted enough time on him. Without another word, they turned and walked upstairs, heading towards the bedroom that had once been ours. I watched them go, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind screaming at me to do something, anything, but I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, drowning in a sea of emotions that threatened to pull me under. As the door to the bedroom clicked shut, I finally broke. I fell to my knees, staring at the papers scattered around me, the words paternity test and 99.9%, mocking me from the page. My life, my marriage, my children. It had all been a lie. It was the end of something, but what came next? And in that moment, something inside me snapped. I wanted to scream, to shout, to break something. Instead, I stumbled out of the house, my legs barely supporting me. The cool night air hit my face, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside. I walked to my car, each step heavy, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts, none of them making sense. Once inside the car, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I needed to think, to clear my head, but all I could hear was their laughter. It echoed in my mind, mocking me, taunting me. The rage I had been trying to suppress boiled over. They took everything, I muttered to myself, the words barely audible. The more I said it, the angrier I got. They had taken my love, my trust, my family. They had reduced me to nothing, a fool in his own home. And for what? I slammed my fist against the dashboard, the pain a brief distraction from the chaos in my head. But it wasn't enough. The anger was too strong, too consuming. It clawed at me, demanding action, demanding revenge. 15 years, I whispered, my voice shaking. 15 fucking years. I had given them everything, my love, my time, my life. And in return, they had betrayed me in the worst possible way. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Whitney's smile, her laughter, even the way she held our sons. It was all a lie, a carefully constructed facade that she had used to hide her betrayal. And Nathan, my own brother, the person I had trusted most in the world, had been in on it all along. My vision blurred as tears welled up, but I blinked them away. There was no time for tears. Tears were for the weak, and I couldn't afford to be weak now. Not when everything I had known was crumbling around me. I could see their faces in my mind, laughing at me, enjoying their sick little game. My grip tightened on the wheel as a plan began to take shape. It was reckless, dangerous, and completely irrational, but it was the only thing that made sense in that moment. I couldn't let them get away with this. They think they've won, I said through gritted teeth. They think they can just take everything from me and walk away. The thought of them together, in our bed, the bed where we had made love, where our sons had been conceived, it was too much. My hands shook with the intensity of my anger, but I didn't try to calm myself. I needed that anger. It was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. I sat there for what felt like hours, going over every detail, every moment that had led to this point. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the signs? But there was no time for self-pity. There was only one thing left to do. I took a deep breath, my decision made. I couldn't just walk away. Not after what they had done. They needed to pay. They needed to suffer the way I was suffering. And I was the only one who could make that happen. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life. The sound was jarring in the quiet night, but it steadied me, gave me focus. I knew what I had to do, and I knew there was no turning back. As I pulled out of the driveway, I cast one last look at the house. The house that had been my home, my sanctuary. It was no longer any of those things. Now, it was just a place where lies had thrived, where betrayal had festered. A place where everything had been taken from me. They don't get to win, I muttered, my voice hard and cold. I drove back, my mind fixed on one thought, Revenge. They had underestimated me, thought I was too weak, too soft to do anything about their betrayal. They were wrong. By the time I was done, they would know exactly who they had messed with, and they would regret it. Time seemed to slow as I sat in the car, each tick of the clock echoing in the quiet night. My mind was razor-sharp, focused on the task ahead. I had replayed the plan over and over, each step meticulously mapped out. There could be no mistakes, no hesitation. When the moment felt right, I opened the car door quietly and stepped out. The night was still, almost unnaturally so, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I moved silently toward the house, each step measured, deliberate. The sounds of laughter and muffled voices seeped through the walls, cutting through the silence like a blade. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm, to focus on the task at hand. The front door was still unlocked. They hadn't bothered to secure it, too caught up in their own twisted pleasure to think that I might return. I slipped inside, the cool air of the house brushing against my skin as I moved through the darkened hallway. The sounds grew louder as I approached the stairs, but I pushed them to the back of my mind. I couldn't afford to let emotion take over now. My destination was the garage. It was where I kept my tools, the ones I used for fixing things around the house. Tonight, they would serve a different purpose. The garage door creaked softly as I opened it, but I didn't pause. My hands knew exactly where to go, my fingers finding the heavy wrench and the hammer without effort. I selected them with an unsettling calmness, as if I were merely preparing for another household task. I stood there for a moment, gripping the cold metal in my hands, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. There was no turning back now. I was past the point of no return. With the tools in hand, I retraced my steps back to the stairs. Their laughter echoed down, filling me with a cold, calculated rage. I began to ascend, each step bringing me closer to the bedroom, closer to them. As I reached the top of the stairs, I paused outside the door. It was slightly ajar, just enough for me to see inside. The sight of them, tangled together in what used to be my bed, nearly made me lose control. But I held back, gripping the wrench so tightly that my knuckles turned white. They hadn't noticed me, too lost in their own world to realize what was coming. I pushed the door open slowly, silently, until I was standing in the doorway, watching them. My heart pounded in my chest, a relentless drumbeat that matched the growing intensity of my anger. Nathan was the first to notice me. His eyes met mine, and for a brief moment, confusion flickered across his face. Then he saw the wrench, and confusion turned to alarm. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, pushing himself up on one elbow. His voice was sharp, edged with a panic that only fueled my resolve. Whitney followed his gaze, her eyes widening as they landed on the tool in my hand. "Wait," she began, her voice trembling with fear, but I didn't let her finish. The words didn't matter anymore. Explanations, excuses, they were all meaningless. All that mattered was what had to be done. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us in a few strides. Nathan tried to scramble out of bed, his hands reaching out as if to ward me off, but it was too late. With every ounce of strength I had, I brought the wrench down on his head. The impact was sickening, the sound of metal against bone echoing through the room. Blood sprayed across the bed, splattering the walls, but I didn't stop. Nathan's body convulsed as the first blow landed, but the second one sent him sprawling across the bed, his limbs twitching uncontrollably. His eyes rolled back, his mouth open in a silent scream as his life slipped away. Whitney screamed, a high-pitched wail that cut through the air like a knife. She pushed herself away from Nathan's lifeless body, her hands clutching the sheets as she tried to back away. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Please, don't." But I had already turned to her, my eyes locked on hers, filled with a cold, unyielding rage. Her betrayal cut deeper than any wound, and no amount of pleading could erase the years of lies, the pain, the humiliation. I raised the wrench again, but she was quicker than Nathan, throwing herself off the bed in a desperate attempt to escape. She stumbled, her feet tangled in the sheets, and she fell to the floor with a thud. I stepped over Nathan's body, moving around the bed to where she lay. She was sobbing, trying to crawl away, but her strength was fading fast. "Please, I'm sorry," she cried, her voice breaking as she looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes. "We didn't mean for it to happen like this. We were going to tell you, I swear." The words only fueled the fire inside me. How many times had she lied? How many times had she looked me in the eyes and told me she loved me, knowing all the while that it was a lie? The wrench felt heavy in my hand, but it was a weight I was willing to bear. I brought it down with the same force, striking her across the temple. Her head snapped to the side, her body crumpling under the blow. She moaned softly, blood trickling from the wound, but she didn't try to move again. I stood over her in the middle of the room, my chest heaving, my hands shaking, and my clothes soaked in blood. The scene around me was unrecognizable. Furniture overturned, the walls splattered with crimson, and the bodies of the two people I had once trusted lying motionless on the bed. The pristine home I had worked so hard to build was now a crime scene, and I was the architect of its destruction. But in that moment, I felt nothing. No regret, no sorrow, just a cold, hard satisfaction. It was over. But as the adrenaline began to fade, the reality of what I had done started to creep in. The walls seemed to close in on me, the silence deafening. I knew I couldn't stay. The house, this town, the life I had known, they were all gone. The authorities would come, and there would be questions, investigations, trials. I couldn't afford to face any of that. My mind was already moving, calculating my next steps. I forced myself into action. I needed to clean up, to erase any trace of what had happened. I moved to the bathroom, stripping off my blood-stained clothes and tossing them into a trash bag. The cold water from the shower hit my skin, washing away the physical evidence of my crime, but the images of what I had done replayed in my mind with relentless clarity. I scrubbed until my skin was raw, but no amount of soap could cleanse the darkness that now tainted my soul. When I stepped out of the shower, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. The man staring back at me was a stranger. Eyes hollow, face gaunt, expression unreadable. I had crossed a line, one I could never come back from. But I couldn't dwell on that now. There was too much at stake. I dried off quickly, pulling on a fresh set of clothes from the closet. I moved through the house with purpose, gathering essentials. A few changes of clothes, some cash, my passport. I packed light, knowing that I needed to leave quickly and travel without drawing attention. There was no time to second-guess, no time to falter. As I moved from room to room, I found myself standing in front of the boys' bedroom door. It was slightly ajar, just like it had been that morning when I had kissed them goodbye before they left for their grandparents' house. The innocence of their lives was starkly contrasted by the horror that had unfolded just down the hall. They were too young to understand any of this, too young to have their lives shattered by the sins of their parents. I wouldn't let this touch them. I wouldn't let them be dragged into the nightmare that had consumed my life. I grabbed their favorite toys, a stuffed bear for Ryan, a toy truck for Jake, and shoved them into the bag. It wasn't much, but it was all I could give them as a semblance of comfort in the chaos that was about to follow. My thoughts shifted to my parents' house. The boys would be asleep by now, unaware of the storm that was brewing. I had to get to them before anyone else did, before the police showed up at their door with questions they couldn't answer. I took one last look around the house. The place that had once been my sanctuary now felt like a tomb, cold and lifeless. I didn't bother locking the door behind me as I left. There was no point. The night air hit me as I stepped outside, crisp and cool against my skin. I walked to the car, my movements brisk, determined. As I slid into the driver's seat, I could feel the weight of the past few hours pressing down on me, but I pushed it aside. There was no time for reflection, no time for doubt. I had a mission now, and nothing would stop me from completing it. I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, leaving behind the life I had known, the life that had been shattered by betrayal. The road ahead was dark, the headlights cutting through the night like a knife through flesh. I drove with a singular focus, my mind set on the one thing that mattered. My sons. The drive to my parents' house was a blur, a mix of adrenaline and dread surging through my veins. My mind was a whirl of chaotic thoughts, but one thing was clear. There was no going back. I had crossed a line, and all that mattered now was getting my sons to safety. The headlights cut through the darkness as I sped down the empty streets, the events of the night playing on a loop in my head. When I pulled up to my parents' house, the familiar sight brought a fleeting sense of calm. The house was quiet, the porch light casting a soft glow over the front yard. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel as if it was the only thing tethering me to reality. My parents would be asleep, the boys nestled in their beds, oblivious to the storm that had erupted in their world. I got out of the car, each step toward the front door heavy with the weight of what I had to do. I knocked lightly, not wanting to startle them, but my mother opened the door almost immediately, her face etched with concern. "Michael, what are you doing here at this hour?" she asked, her voice a mix of surprise and worry. "Mom, I need to take the boys." "It's an emergency," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Her eyes widened, and she reached out to touch my arm, her hand trembling slightly. "What's happened? Are you okay?" "There's no time to explain. Please, I just need to get them and go," I insisted, trying to keep the urgency from tipping over into panic. She looked at me, searching my face for answers, but she didn't push. Instead, she turned and called out to my father, who appeared a moment later, his expression mirroring hers. "Michael, what's going on?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep and confusion. "I'll explain everything later, I promise. But right now, I need to get Ryan and Jake out of here." "We have to leave," I repeated, the words coming out in a rush. My father exchanged a worried glance with my mother, but he nodded. "All right, let's get the boys." They led me upstairs to the room where Ryan and Jake were sleeping. The sight of them, peaceful and unaware, made my heart twist. I crouched by their beds, gently shaking them awake. "Hey, guys, we're going on a little trip," I whispered, trying to keep my voice light, though my heart was pounding in my chest. Ryan, the older of the two, rubbed his eyes and looked at me, confused. "Daddy? What's going on?" "We just need to go somewhere, buddy. It's a bit of an adventure," I said, forcing a smile. "Let's get you dressed." Jake stirred and sat up, yawning and looking around sleepily. "Can I bring my truck?" he mumbled. "Of course," I said, ruffling his hair. "Grab your truck, and let's get going." My parents helped gather their things, coats, shoes, a couple of toys, and soon we were heading back downstairs. The boys were still groggy, clutching their favorite stuffed animals as we made our way to the front door. "Michael, are you sure you're all right?" my mother asked again, her voice trembling with worry. "You're scaring me." "I'm fine, Mom. I just need to keep them safe," I said, avoiding her eyes as I ushered the boys outside. "Safe from what?" my father pressed, his tone more urgent. I paused, turning to face them, knowing I owed them some explanation but not sure how much to reveal. "I've done something I can't undo. We can't stay here. I'll call you when I can. But for now, please, just trust me." The words hung in the air, and I could see the fear and confusion in their eyes. They didn't understand, but they nodded. My mother pulled me into a quick, tight hug before letting go, her eyes wet with unshed tears. "Take care of yourself, Michael. And those boys," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I will," I promised, though the weight of my actions made the words feel hollow. I hurried the boys into the car, buckling them into their seats. As I got into the driver's seat, I glanced back at the house one last time. The home I grew up in, the place that had always felt safe, now felt like another life, slipping away with each passing second. I started the engine, and as the car pulled away, I could see my parents standing in the doorway, watching us go. My mother's hand was pressed to her mouth, my father's arm around her shoulders, their figures shrinking in the rearview mirror until they disappeared entirely. As we drove through the darkened streets, the weight of what I was leaving behind settled heavily on my chest. The boys were quiet in the back seat, their eyes closing as sleep overtook them once more. But there would be no rest for me, no reprieve from the storm I had unleashed. I had no idea where we were going, no clear destination in mind, but one thing was certain. We were running, and we couldn't look back. Canada greeted us with a crisp, unfamiliar chill in the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil we had left behind. As I drove into the small town that was to be our new home, The towering pines and snow-covered rooftops offered a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The boys, Ryan and Jake, were wide-eyed, taking in the new sights with curiosity and wonder. They were too young to fully understand the gravity of our situation, and for that, I was grateful. Their innocence was the one thing I was determined to preserve. We found a small house on the edge of town, its faded blue paint and creaking porch welcoming in its own way. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The local real estate agent hadn't asked many questions, and I hadn't volunteered any information. A few forged documents and a quick cash transaction had secured the place. It was remote, far from prying eyes, just what we needed to disappear. The first few weeks were the hardest. Every time I stepped outside, I half expected someone to recognize me, to call out my name. But of course, no one did. We were just another family trying to start over, and in this sleepy town, people respected privacy. They were friendly enough. Nods of acknowledgement when we passed on the street, polite greetings at the grocery store, but they didn't pry. It was a relief. Ryan and Jake adapted quickly to their new surroundings. The small town school welcomed them with open arms, and soon they were coming home with stories of new friends and adventures. Their laughter filled the house, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence that had settled over our lives after that night. I watched them closely, searching for any signs of the trauma they had been through, but they seemed to bounce back with a resilience that amazed me. Children are stronger than we give them credit for. I threw myself into the role of being their father, more determined than ever to make up for the upheaval I had caused in their lives. I lied them about their mom. I made their breakfasts each morning, walked them to school, and helped them with their homework in the evenings. I became a fixture at their soccer games, cheering them on from the sidelines, pretending that everything was normal. It was a routine that grounded me, gave me purpose. The town, with its quaint shops and friendly residents, began to feel like home. I found work under the table doing odd jobs, fixing roofs, repairing fences, whatever needed to be done. The pay was modest, but it was enough to get by. More importantly, it kept me busy, kept my mind from drifting back to the dark places it liked to go. The physical labor was a welcome distraction, and the townspeople appreciated a reliable handyman who asked for nothing more than his pay. As the seasons changed, so did we. The boys grew taller, their faces losing the softness of childhood as they entered their teenage years. With each passing year, the memories of that night in our old home faded, but they never disappeared entirely. They lingered at the edges of my consciousness, surfacing in quiet moments when the weight of what I had done pressed down on me. I didn't speak of it, not even to myself. It was a secret I would carry to my grave, a burden that had become a part of me. Yet, despite the darkness that lingered in my past, there was a lightness in our new life. Ryan and Jake were thriving, and for that, I was grateful. I watched them grow into young men, their lives full of promise and potential. They didn't know the whole truth about what had brought us to this place, and I prayed they never would. All they needed to know was that I loved them, that I would do anything to protect them. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Jake looked up from his plate, his eyes bright with the excitement of youth. "Dad, do you think we'll ever go back to where we used to live?" The question caught me off guard, but I kept my voice steady. "I don't think so, Jake. We're happy here, aren't we?" Ryan nodded, a thoughtful look on his face. "Yeah, I like it here. It's peaceful." "Me too," I agreed, forcing a smile. "This is home now." And it was. In this quiet town, I had found a way to start over, to build a new life out of the ashes of the old one. The past was still there, a shadow that followed me, but it no longer controlled me. I had learned to live with it, to let it shape me without defining me. But I knew one thing for certain. I would never again underestimate the pain of betrayal, nor would I allow it to destroy us. We had endured the storm and emerged stronger, and that was something no one could ever take away from us.